Hi, everybody. Welcome again to IV English. I'm Bruce.
I'm Angela.
And I'm Wesley.
Today is day 2 of a 2-day article on dragons. Actually, that's how we would say it in the West, but yesterday we learned that in Eastern cultures like China, Korea, and Japan, dragons represent a good influence and people aren't afraid of them. They appreciate the power that dragons are supposed to be able to give to people.
Okay, so let's read the article and find out what Western dragons are seeing. Because yesterday we talked about Eastern dragons. Today we're going to talk about Western dragons.
Contrary to how they are viewed in the East, dragons in Western cultures are often seen as evil, fire-breathing beasts associated with greed and chaos. Typically, Western dragons are depicted as two-winged, four-legged lizards with sharp teeth and claws, unlike Asian dragons that normally do not have wings or breathe fire. However, early Western dragons, including those from Norse and Mediterranean traditions, were often portrayed as large snakes. This is no surprise, given that the word dragon comes from a Greek term that means serpent or giant sea fish. Western dragons are frequently featured in myths and legends. One of the most famous dragons in Western mythology is the European dragon. This type of dragon is a common theme in medieval legends and fairy tales. In many of these stories, the evil beasts are often killed by heroes in the end. The significance of Western dragons isn't limited to folk tales. They also play important roles in religious and cultural traditions. For example, in parts of the Bible, dragons represent the devil. Meanwhile, in Norse mythology, dragons are said to be a symbol of vast destruction. However, the Vikings saw dragons as symbolic of wealth and power, similar to how the Asian dragons are viewed. Dragons are fascinating mythical creatures that have captured the imagination of people worldwide for many centuries. Despite the difference in their perception between Eastern and Western cultures, they all share a common sense of mystery and wonder. Even today, dragons continue to be frequent characters in books, movies, TV shows, video games, and various other forms of media.
Okay, so contrary to how they are viewed in the East, so contrary to means the opposite of. But you can't say the opposite of how they are viewed in the East. That sounds weird. So we have to begin the sentence with contrary. So unlike how they are viewed in the East, dragons in Western cultures are often seen as evil, fire-breathing beasts associated with greed and chaos. They love to sit on their piles of gold. They love to carry off fair maidens for snacks. So, yeah, they're not good dudes.
好，所以呢 contrary to 就是相反于相对于 opposed in nature or character， 所以相对于how they are viewed in the East， 相对于他们在东方是如何的被看待。那怎么样呢？这都是修饰那个 dragons。龙 in Western cultures， 在西方文化里面的龙跟东方是不一样的。西方文化里面的龙怎么样 are often seen as 常常被看作是一种 evil 邪恶的，然后呢 fire breathing 就是喷着火的邪恶的 beasts 是野兽，然后呢 associated with that are associated with 这些野兽怎么样跟什么联想在一起呢？跟什么关联在一起呢？跟 greed 贪婪还有 chaos 混乱这个联想在一起。
Typically, usually or normally, Western dragons are depicted, they're shown or described, as two-winged, four-legged lizards with sharp teeth and claws. And in fact, many lizards, although they don't have wings, there is a species that does, and it can jump long distances and glide with its so-called wings, but usually not, nor do they breathe fire, thank God. And this is in contradistinction to the Asian typical picture of a dragon which is more inviting, shall we say.
这个 inviting 就看起来比较和蔼可亲，就看起来比较和善那种，好像邀请你去亲近他那种感觉。好，所以我们可以看到这一句话，他说呢 typically 就是 usually 和 normally 或者 for the most part， 这个通常这个典型上面呢，西方的龙 are depicted as， 那 depict 这个字呢，就是 to represent in a picture or sculpture， 就是用画的或者用雕塑来呈现，这叫 depicted。所以西方的龙呢，通常被呈现成什么样子呢？是 two-winged， 这个两个只翅膀的，那 four-legged， 四只腿的。那各位注意到这个 ed 的用法，这个地方是名词后面加 ed， 那前面通常有个数字，就成为一个新的形容词。所以 two-winged 就是有两只翅膀的，然后 four-legged 就是四只腿的。Lizard， 西方的龙通常其实就是长着翅膀的，然后有四只腿的蜥蜴。With 有着什么呢？ Sharp 很锋利的 teeth 牙齿，还有 claws 还有爪子。这个 unlike 这状况完全跟什么不一样呢？ Unlike 就是 very different from， 跟这个 Asian dragons 跟亚洲龙是很不一样的。因为亚洲龙怎么样呢？ That normally do not have wings， 这个亚洲的龙通常是 normally as a rule usually 通常是没有翅膀的。但是亚洲尤其中国的龙没有翅膀，可是会飞哦。那亚洲的龙也不太会 breathe fire， 也不太喷火。
I think it's interesting that Western dragons have kind of evolved. The earliest like ones you see in medieval manuscripts are basically very similar to Chinese ones in that they're long little shapes, and then their wings are like very vestigial. They're very tiny wings that wouldn't actually work. But as Europeans learned more and more about actual anatomy, they started making dragons much more like chickens, basically, in their body shape. So they became more and more bird-like and like more actual wings.
Yeah， 好，所以 Angela 说的这个西方的龙的形象其实也有演变的哈，在这个中世纪或者是他们的西方的龙呢，跟东方的龙比较像，他们有翅膀，但是翅膀都小小的。可是后来随着他们的这个解剖学的发展，他们慢慢发现到那个小翅膀不可能帮那个龙飞起来，所以你会发现他们的龙的翅膀越来越大，所以有的时候看起来是不是像鸟一样。
Yeah, but the thing is, the original like wings in the medieval manuscripts, they were just there to be like, it flies. It was just a symbol. It wasn't meant to be how it physically looked. It was like, so this thing is flying wing. Yeah, it's just a symbol.
Yeah, 所以中世纪的西方的龙那个翅膀小小的只是一个象征，告诉你说它会飞，它并不是从物理学上可以真正就靠那两个翅膀就可以飞。所以后来人发现物理学上面那样飞不起来，所以就把翅膀变得越来越大。
So the thing I just said is actually in our next sentence. It says, however, early Western dragons, including those from Norse and Mediterranean traditions, were often portrayed as large snakes. So early on, we also drew them as snakes. Now, Norse means Norway and Norse come from the same root, which is the Viking culture that was up there on the north area of Europe. And the Mediterranean, of course, is the southernmost edge of Europe, which is, you know, the giant sea, the Dizhonghai.
但是呢，这里讲到这个，其实就是刚刚 Angela 就刚刚讲的那一段，就是这个早期的西方的龙，包括 those 就是 dragons， 包括来自哪里的龙呢？这来自于 North 北欧，还有地中海，他们也常常被描绘成为看起来这个 were portrayed as 就是被描绘成为什么 ？portrayed 这个字呢，跟 depict 在这里意思是一样的，所以他们常常被描绘成为是 large snakes， 是大的蛇啊，跟东方的龙比较像。
This is no surprise, given that the word dragon comes from a Greek term that means serpent or giant sea fish.
So I just want to say, I saw a YouTube video the other day that showed giant fish in Seattle Bay. Not Seattle Bay, but further north, like on the Canadian West Coast. These giant fish that when they drove by your boat, it really looked like a sea serpent. I don't remember the variety of fish. It's like, I'm not sure. It was silvery and it looked exactly like a sea serpent. And you're like, oh, no wonder. Wonder we had artists depicting this based on what sailors said, because literally these fish look like that. And you don't see the head, so you can only imagine that it was some kind of terrible water serpent going by your boat when it's just a giant fish, really.
Yeah, 好，所以 Angela 说她前几天看到这个一段影片，在西雅图外海，这个靠近加拿大那边的外海，有一种很大的鱼，那个鱼呢，游过你身边的时候，你真的感觉像是一个巨大的蛇那种感觉，这个银色的，所以难怪以前的人可能就看到这样的生物就会想象出龙。所以我们看到这个句子，他说 This is no surprise given that given that， 那 given 就是 considering， 就是这个我们如果考虑到，或者是这个我们有这么一个基础理论的基础 given that， 就是我们考虑到以下这件事情呢，就没有什么好奇怪的。考虑到什么事情呢？考虑到 dragon 这个字呢，事实上是来自于一个希腊的字 a Greek term that means， 这个希腊文它的意思是 serpent， 就是 serpent 通常是指比较大的蛇，或者是文学里面的一个用语，那或者是在希腊里面这个字也可以表示 giant 巨大的这个海鱼 sea fish。 那这个 dragon 这个字呢，它讲来自于希腊文，其实你要去看它的字源的话， dragon 这个字其实它是先来自于 Middle English， 然后从 Middle English 又哪里来的呢？又是来自于 Old French， 那 Old French 又来自于 Latin。 那这个 Latin 这个字呢，其实就在拉丁文里面它就是表示 large serpent， 那这个拉丁文这个字又来自于希腊文，所以它这里说它是来自于希腊文，这样讲也没有错。那其实在希腊文里面它的意思就是 kind of serpent， 就是大蛇的意思。
So Western dragons are frequently featured in myths and legends, like St. George and the Dragon, for instance.
好，所以西方的龙呢 are frequently 经常怎么样 featured， 就是成为要角，就是成为什么东西要角呢？在这个 myths， 在神话，还有在 legends， 还有在传说里面呢，西方的龙常常是重要的角色。
One of the most famous dragons in Western mythology is the European dragon.
好，所以呢，这个最有名的在西方的 mythology， 在西方的神话里面最有名的这个龙呢，就是所谓的欧洲龙。
This type of dragon, what we're calling the European dragon, is a common theme in medieval legends and fairy tales, especially in the modern retelling of such. I feel like the European dragon TM has come out of the modern retelling ones where everyone's just like, there was a dragon in a castle or whatever. So, yeah, it's a common theme, though, in medieval legends, but it's also a very common theme in modern fairy tales.
好，所以 this type of dragon 就这种类型的龙，也就是 European dragon， 它是一种 common theme， 它是个常见的主题。theme 就是文学作品或者是小说或者是这个底下讲 legends 跟 fairy tales 里面的一个主题，所以它是一个很常见的主题。在哪里呢？在中世纪的 legends 传说，还有 fairy tales 就是童话故事。
In many of these stories, the evil beasts are often killed by heroes in the end. And I'm sure you've seen some cartoons, maybe for children, or in full-blast media 3D movies. You can also find dragons occasionally featured. And they are always evil. Well, I shouldn't say always, but to scare the audience, they will show a dragon, and you're supposed to, a dragon, how horrible. This is part of the cultural idea of what dragons do.
好，所以呢 in many of these stories， 在很多的这些故事，就是这些传说还有神话故事里面呢，这个 the evil beasts， 这个邪恶的野兽就指的是龙啦 are often killed， 通常会被这个杀掉 by heroes， 被英雄杀掉 in the end， 就这样子就到故事结尾的时候呢，英雄会把那个龙杀掉，好，英雄屠龙。
Now, the significance of Western dragons isn't limited to folk tales. They also play important roles in religious and cultural traditions. So it's the reason I think actually why they're the bad guys in Western culture is because of religious traditions.
所以这个地方我们讲到说 the significance 就是重要性，西方龙的重要性 isn't limited to folk tales， isn't limited to 就是不限于，所以西方龙的重要性不限于就是民间传说而已， folk tale 就有民间的传说，所以不只是民间传说有很重要，他们也怎么样 play important roles， 他们也扮演了重要的角色，在哪里呢？在宗教跟在文化的传统里面也有重要的角色，所以西方的龙不只是民间传说而已，他们在宗教在文化传统上面也有很重要的角色。
For example, in parts of the Bible, dragons represent the devil. This is clear from the story of Adam and Eve, who were living in paradise, and they were told, you can have anything you want to eat or do here, but do not take an apple from the tree of knowledge.
And the snake's like, hey, dudes, there's this really lovely apple here. Are you sure you don't want to, try it? You know, God just wants to keep something really good from you, right?
好，所以呢，他这里讲到说，举例来说 ，in parts of the Bible， 就在圣经的某些章节、部分章节里面呢，这个龙代表的就是 the devil， 代表的是魔鬼。那这个一般大概我们马上想到这个代表魔鬼的，在圣经里面就是那条诱惑亚当夏娃的那一只蛇。那只蛇呢，其实在他们的西方传统里面，蛇跟 dragons 其实是属于同一类的东西。
Meanwhile, in Norse mythology, dragons are said to be a symbol of vast destruction. I mean, this makes sense because with great power comes great responsibility, right? And if you don't exercise that responsibility, it comes with great destruction.
那 meanwhile， 同时呢，在此同时这个所谓在此同时，就是在圣经里面它代表的是魔鬼。那在此同时呢，相对的在北欧的神话里面，龙 are said to be 被说成是怎么样 a symbol of 被说成是一个象征。什么象征呢？ vast destruction。 vast 就是巨大的很大的 very great in size 或者 very great in extent。那 destruction 是毁灭，所以在北欧神话里面呢，龙它被认为是巨大毁灭的象征，所以跟这个圣经里面是一样的概念。
However, the Vikings saw dragons as symbolic of wealth and power, similar to how the Asian dragons are viewed. So, dragon, depending on what country you're in Europe and what period of history, might have completely opposite meanings. One, they are evil. Two, they are great. They give you prosperity, they give you peace, and so on.
Everyone agrees, though, dragons are powerful.
Yeah. 但是呢，相对的 the Vikings 维京人呢 they saw dragons as 他们把龙视为什么呢？视为 symbolic of 所谓的 symbolic 就是 serving as a symbol， 就是 symbolic of 意思就是什么的象征，所以他们认为他们把龙视为什么象征呢？象征 wealth 财富，还有 power 还有权力。Similar to 就是 which is similar， 省略了 which is， 这个跟什么很类似呢？跟 how the Asian dragons are viewed， 跟东方的龙被如何的看待是很像的，所以维京人对于龙的看法跟东方人很像，就表示他们看到的龙是财富跟权力的象征。
And so we come to our conclusion for both days. Dragons are fascinating mythical creatures. They're creatures that everyone is very interested in. We're always like, ooh, dragons. And they have captured the imagination of people worldwide for many centuries. If you capture the imagination of people, it means people think about you all the time, or a lot of the time, or very importantly, you think of them as important.
所以 dragons are fascinating 就是迷人的 captivating C-A-P-T-I-V-A-T-I-N-G captivating 这是一个 fascinating 的一个同义字，它是很迷人的一种 mythical creatures 神话的生物。那这种生物呢 that have captured the imagination of 那各位把这个语快记起来to capture the imagination of someone 就是吸引住他的想象力，就抓住了他的想象力。 capture 这个字就是 seize S-E-I-Z-E 那就是 to attract and hold 的意思，所以他抓住了这些人的想象力。什么人呢？ People worldwide 全世界的人的想象力，所以抓住他们的想象力就让他们有无限的想象空间，他们很喜欢去想象这种东西。然后呢 for many centuries 已经好几世纪了。
Despite the difference in their perception between Eastern and Western cultures, they all share a common sense of mystery and wonder. We talked to this point in quite a bit of detail. Eastern and Western cultures have thought of, or described cultures in quite different ways. But even within one country over time, dragons' perception of dragons changed maybe from good to bad or from bad to good. But they all share a common sense of mystery and wonder. Mystery is something that's hard to understand, and wonder is, who cares if you understand it or not? It's great.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's a great way to say that.
Yeah. Despite 尽管 the difference in 尽管有这个差异在哪里的差异呢？ The difference in their perception 就是他们的认知跟看法 perception between Eastern and Western cultures， 所以尽管在西方跟东方的文化里面对于这个龙的认知有不同，英文是用名词来表达 despite the difference in their perception， 那他们都怎么样？ They all share a common sense of something， 就都有共同的什么感觉？他们都有共同的什么感觉呢？ Mystery 神秘的感觉，还有 wonder 让你很惊奇的感觉。
Even today, dragons continue to be frequent characters in books, movies, TV shows, video games, and various other forms of media. They're everywhere.
即使是今天的龙 continue to be 就持续是仍然是 frequent characters 常见的角色 frequent 就常见的在哪里是常见的角色呢？在书、在电影、在电视节目、在电玩游戏还有 various other 不同的其他的 forms of media 媒体形式里面龙都是一个常见的角色。
Okay, as I warned you yesterday, we have a quiz. We have 4 questions for you.And if you don't get them all right, we will sick a dragon on you.
For instance, number 1 is, how are Japanese dragons different from Chinese ones? And in this case, a Japanese dragon is going to come grab you if you get it wrong.
所以呢，这个日本龙跟中国龙有什么不一样呢？
I said we'll sick a dragon on you. It's not S-I-C-K, not healthy. It's S-I-C.And that means you can control a person or, more likely, an animal to attack somebody.
所以等于说这个召唤或者驱使那种感觉 S-I-C.
So the answer is C. They have bodies that are more similar to snakes.
好，答案是 C 啊 They 就是日本的龙呢，它们的身体更像蛇。
Number 2. Which of the following statements is true about dragons in the West?
关于西方的龙，以下哪一项叙述是正确的？
The answer is B. They have been vital figures in literature and religion. Vital here means extremely important.
答案是 B 好，他们是文学和宗教中的重要人物或者重要的这个角色。
And number 3, how are dragons similar in both the East and the West?
东西方的龙有什么相似之处呢
The answer is D. They are both associated with mystery and wonder.
答案是 D 他们与神秘还有惊奇联想在一起。
And number 4. 4 people are talking about dragons. Which of the following is not correct?
4个人在谈论龙，以下哪项不正确？
The wrong answer, as it were, is C. Dragons symbolize wealth and power in certain sections of the Bible.
好，所以不正确的叙述是 C， 因为 C 讲说在圣经的某些章节里面呢，龙象征财富跟权力，不对，正好相反。
That's it for day 2 of our 2-day lesson on mythical, wonderful, interesting dragons. Hope you enjoyed this program, and we'll be back a couple more times this month for you. Until then,
bye-bye.